I pressed the save button on my laptop for what felt like the 100th time that night, my tired, blurry eyes fixed on the glowing screen. My translation client needed this contract by early morning, some international deal they claimed couldn't be delayed, and I had already spent the past 6 hours turning tangled Italian legal jargon into English that was just as dry. The words had begun to blur together sometime around hour 4, but I couldn't stop. Not when the bills were piling up faster than I could translate my way out of them. My phone sat quietly beside me on the sagging sofa cushion. Too quiet. Maya should have texted by now. I picked it up and checked the time, 10:22. Her tutoring session at the library ended at 9, and although subway trains in Brooklyn often ran late at night, she should have been home by 9:45 at the latest. I had called twice, both times going straight to voicemail. The rational part of me whispered that maybe her phone had died. But the mother part of me, the part that had kept me alive and standing through 3 years of single motherhood in a city that could be anything but kind, was screaming that something was wrong. If you're still listening and something in this story touches a part of your own heart, take a second to hit subscribe, like, and share this video so we can keep bringing you more heartfelt stories every day. And if you don't mind, would you tell me where you're watching from? Leave a comment below and let us know where in the world this story has reached. We cherish every word you share with us. I called again, my hand trembling with worry, and once more was met with the empty voice of voicemail. Maya, it's Mom. I'm starting to get really worried. Call me back the moment you get this. I stood up, pacing across our narrow living room with its frayed sofa and peeling walls, moving like a caged animal. The 2-bedroom apartment we rented sat on the 3rd floor of an old building in Flatbush, with water-stained walls and a damp smell that clung to everything. When I moved here with Maya after the divorce, I told myself it was temporary. But then Ryan disappeared with the last of the money in our joint account, and temporary turned into 3 long years, 3 long winters, 3 humid summers without air conditioning, and not a single full night of sleep. The arguing from the apartment upstairs started again, a man's growling voice and heavy footsteps pounding through the ceiling. I grabbed the thinnest coat I owned, the one with the frayed collar, shoved my phone into the pocket, and rushed outside as the November cold slashed against my skin like tiny blades. Brooklyn at night carried its own kind of unease, half eerily quiet, half alive with traffic and the muffled thump of music from street corner bars. I walked fast along the sidewalk, forcing myself to keep a steady pace, my eyes scanning every passerby, every shadow. Maya usually took the D train home, and the nearest exit was 3 blocks away. I knew her route by heart every Thursday night. But tonight everything felt wrong. Every horn, every shadow sent my heart plummeting. I hadn't brought an umbrella. The drizzle turned into a downpour in minutes. My hair clung to my forehead, rain seeping into my sleeves and around my ankles. My cheap canvas shoes were soaked through almost instantly. I hurried past a convenience store, where a few men smoking outside stared at me but said nothing. I forced myself to walk as though I wasn't unraveling inside. Each step echoed against the slick pavement, my mind filling with the worst possibilities. If Maya wasn't at the library, if she missed the train, if someone had I stopped the thought short, swallowed hard, and walked faster. The library was only 6 blocks away. Every closed restaurant, every laundromat with a few tired people waiting for their spin cycles, every dim storefront, I scanned them all for her face. But there was no Maya. No small figure with a purple backpack and worn-out Converse sneakers. The rain poured so hard the entire street blurred into a smear of gray. A car sped through a puddle, sending a cold splash of filthy water up my leg. Panic clawed its way up my chest, but I forced myself to keep going. I couldn't stop. Not now. Where was she? Why hadn't she called? If her phone was broken, if she was hurt, if someone I tripped on a cracked piece of sidewalk and nearly fell, my knee burning with a sharp sting. I stopped just long enough to take a breath in the exhaust, thick air scented with leftover grease from shuttered food carts. I felt like I was trapped in some terrible movie. Only there was no director, no script, just the raw, brutal truth that I was alone in the rain, searching for my child with a heart ready to break. And I knew, with a mother's instinct, that something was wrong. Very wrong. I pulled my coat tighter, shivering as the rain rolled down my forehead, and along the bridge of my nose. Yet I didn't stop. It was near 11, with almost no one left on the streets except silent figures huddled under awnings or standing in the weak glow of late-night corner stores. I passed a small park between two low apartment buildings, a place where kids played basketball during the day but turned hollow and shadowed at night. I never walked through the park after dark, but tonight everything was a possibility. A bolt of lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating the wet pavement ahead, and that was when I heard it. Footsteps splashing fast through puddles, ragged breathing, a soft, broken whimper. I turned and my heart seized. Maya. She was running, rain whipping into her face, her hair wild and tangled, her eyes wide with terror. She ran like her life depended on it. Maya, I yelled, but the rain swallowed my voice. She didn't see me. She sprinted toward the small covered shelter in the park, where an old bench sat under a sagging roof. Someone was sitting there, a man. I saw only his silhouette, broad-shouldered, straight-backed, wearing a long dark coat. Maya stumbled into the lit space, nearly slipping, and almost fell into him. "Please," she gasped, chest heaving. "Please help me. There's a man chasing me. He's trying to take me." I started running, my shoes sliding on the wet concrete, and then I saw him. Another figure emerging, less than 20 meters away. A dark hoodie, hands shoved in his pocket, heavy steps pounding closer. When he saw Maya near the man, he froze, then began moving again faster this time. The man stood up. I still couldn't see his face clearly, but his voice cut through the rain, low and steady and sharp as a blade. "Step behind me." Maya obeyed instinctively, shrinking behind the broad back now shielding her. "She's mine," the man in the hoodie snarled, rough and irritated. "She comes with me." "I don't think so." The stranger's voice stayed impossibly calm. No anger, just something cold and certain. "I don't want trouble, but you should step aside." The man pulled his hand from his pocket. A knife glinted under the dim streetlight. I screamed Maya's name, but I was still 10 meters away, too far, too late. Then everything happened so fast I barely breathed. The stranger moved just one step, and suddenly he had the attacker's wrist in his grip. A crack split the air, loud and merciless. The man howled, the knife clattering to the ground. 2 other men appeared from the shadows. I didn't know where they came from. Both wore dark coats, moving with quick, sharp precision. They didn't speak. They just seized the injured man, who was clutching his broken wrist. The first man spoke softly, almost bored. "Take him elsewhere. Teach him a lesson about proper behavior. Please." I didn't mean, the attacker pleaded, but no one listened. One of the men dragged him away, disappearing into the rain. I reached them just as Maya turned, and for the first time that night I saw clearly the face of the man who had saved her. A sharply defined face, deep, steady eyes, black hair tousled by rain yet oddly undisturbed. He looked at me as though he had known me far longer than a single moment. I threw my arms around Maya, who was shaking and sobbing uncontrollably. She clung to me, whispering over and over through her tears, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. My phone died. I got lost. I didn't know what to do." I held her tighter, rain mixing with tears on both our faces. "You're safe now, baby. I'm here. And when I lifted my head to meet the stranger's gaze, I knew I would never forget his eyes. Not just because he had saved my child, but because in that brief moment, I understood he was no ordinary man. Ordinary men didn't appear at the exact right second. Ordinary men didn't command others into the darkness without raising their voice. But tonight, he was the one my daughter had begged for help, and he had answered. I don't remember exactly how I thanked that man. All I recall is that Maya didn't let go of me for even a second, and I didn't let go of her either, as if the moment I loosened my grip she would disappear into the darkness again. He walked beside us from the park all the way back to our building, not speaking much, not probing, simply moving with steady, unhurried strides, as though the stormy night couldn't touch him. Every time I glanced at him, his expression remained calm, his eyes scanning the surroundings, missing nothing, not a single shadow. When we reached the old building where Maya and I lived, I could feel the way his gaze swept across the cracked windows, flaking walls, and scratched apartment plaques. This was where I was raising a child. A quiet shame tightened in my chest, not because of poverty, but because I hadn't been able to give my daughter a place that felt safe. I slid the key into the front door and turned back toward him, wanting to say something but not knowing how to begin. He seemed to understand my hesitation, because he gave a small nod and handed me a matte black business card. No company name, no title, only a single elegant line centered on the card, Lucas Romano. Beneath it, a phone number. If you need anything, anytime, call. His voice was low but clear, like a command dressed in courtesy. I opened my mouth to ask why he helped us, but he had already turned away, stepping back into the rain without looking over his shoulder. I stood there for a few seconds, watching his silhouette fade into the storm before pulling Maya inside. We climbed the 3 flights of stairs in silence, the only sounds our wet shoes squeaking and our uneven breathing. Once inside, Maya collapsed onto the couch, trembling, her face drained of color. I knelt to remove her soaked shoes, my hands shaking from rain that still seeped into my bones. I dried her hair, changed her into warm clothes, and made her a mug of hot cocoa. When she held it with both hands, I sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Maya, tell me what happened." She stayed quiet for a long while before whispering that the tutoring session had run late, that she had taken the wrong train, and when she got off to switch trains, she realized someone was following her. At first she thought it was a coincidence, but when she turned multiple times and he was still there, she panicked and ran. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she looked at me. And when I saw that man in the park, I just ran toward him. I don't know why I trusted him, but something about him made me think he would help. I squeezed her shoulder gently, a wave of gratitude and fear tightening inside me. I remembered the way Lucas had positioned himself in front of her, the look in his eyes, the way he had commanded those 2 men without raising his voice. That man was not ordinary. Not because he appeared at the exact moment we needed him, but because he moved through danger as if the world around him bent to his will. I took the business card out of my pocket, staring at the name and number against the black paper. Lucas Romano. The name felt strangely familiar, as though I'd heard it somewhere on the news, or whispered in a story no one spoke openly. I wasn't sure whether I should keep the card, yet I couldn't throw it away. I lay beside Maya on the couch that night, listening to rain tapping against the window, unable to stop wondering whether I had met a savior or led my daughter closer to a world I understood nothing about. But deep down, I knew this. If Lucas Romano hadn't appeared tonight, I might have lost the most precious part of my life. And that terrified me more than any mystery surrounding him. I couldn't sleep that night, no matter how hard I forced my eyes shut, even with Maya breathing softly beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him walking into the rain, silent and unshaken. Lucas Romano. His name echoed in my mind like a distant yet persistent sound. The next morning I woke earlier than usual, made breakfast for Maya, and walked her to school. I didn't ask her anything more about the night before. I only held her hand a little tighter as she stepped into the old brick building, watching until she disappeared completely from sight. The entire day I tried to work as usual. The Italian contract still lay unfinished, but I couldn't focus. I kept checking my phone, staring at the numbers on the black card. I didn't call. Not because I didn't want to, but because I had no idea what I would say if he answered. "Thank you?" Or, ask him if he was even a normal man. Evening came. Maya returned home safely. Relief swept through me, though the heaviness in our apartment remained. I made a simple dinner. We ate quietly, Maya speaking occasionally about school, while I nodded, pretending everything was normal. After she went to bed, I cleaned the kitchen, then sat at my small desk by the window, the glow of the street lamp filtering through the thin curtain. The computer screen lit up, the half-translated document waiting. I adjusted my glasses and typed a few lines, then stopped. Something was wrong. I didn't hear the usual arguing from upstairs, no music from the apartment below. The building felt unnervingly still. I lifted my eyes to the window. The alley behind the building was dark, lit only by a flickering street lamp. A car was parked there. I didn't know when it had arrived. Black-tinted windows, engine silent. My heartbeat quickened. I told myself it was probably just another tenant's car. Then a sound rang out. Sharp, quick, a dry crack that tore through the night, followed by the shattering of glass. I felt it before I understood it. A violent rush of air tore across the room. A sliver of flying glass sliced my cheek. I dropped to the floor, instinct taking over, screaming Maya's name. Her voice shot back from the bedroom. "Mom!" I crawled toward her, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. She was sitting upright in bed, eyes wide with terror. I pulled her to the ground and held her against my chest. Everything fell silent. No car speeding away. No second shot. Only the soft patter of rain returning, as though nothing had happened. When I was sure there was no immediate danger, I carefully stepped out to check. The window was shattered, glass scattered across the floor. On the wall beside where I'd been sitting moments before was a small, jagged hole. I moved closer, trembling. The bullet was lodged deep in the plaster, less than a hand's width from my head. If I hadn't ducked, if I had lifted my head a second earlier. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. I didn't need the card. I had memorized the number. Lucas Romano, I whispered, and hit call. The phone rang only once. His voice came through, low and steady, as if he already knew I would call at this exact moment. What happened, Emily? I didn't ask how he knew. My name. I didn't have room in my mind for questions. I only spoke through a tightening throat. There was a gunshot. Someone fired into my apartment. Maybe a warning, maybe meant for me. Or Maya. I don't know. I only know I can't let this happen again. A brief silence followed, barely a heartbeat long. Then he said, firm and unmistakable, "I'm coming. Don't do anything. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone. I'll be there in 15 minutes. And before I could answer, the call ended. I sat among the shattered glass, phone still in hand, my heartbeat crashing against my ribs. This time I wasn't just afraid. I was angry. Angry because we had done nothing wrong. Angry that the world could threaten a child simply for taking the wrong train home. And beneath that anger was something I never thought I'd feel. Relief. Relief that he was coming. Lucas Romano, the man I knew nothing about, yet placed more hope in than anyone else. He arrived just as promised, even sooner than 15 minutes. When I heard the 3 short, decisive knocks, unmistakable, unlike anyone else who had ever knocked on my door, I knew it was him. I opened the door just enough to see his stern face, his cold eyes sweeping the hallway behind me. No greeting, no expression. He stepped inside, bringing with him the chill of night air and something harder to define, a feeling of safety intertwined with danger. His gaze traveled across the room, taking in the shattered window, the broken glass, the bullet hole. Maya sat curled on the couch, still frightened. Lucas didn't look at me or her. He turned to another man entering behind him, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat and an earpiece. Lucas's voice was low and precise. Roof, hallways, stairwells, front entrance. "I want the entire building swept in 5 minutes." The man nodded and disappeared. Lucas finally turned to me, his eyes softening slightly. "Are either of you hurt?" I shook my head, my voice catching. "No, but if I hadn't ducked when I did, I couldn't finish." He nodded once, then stepped toward Maya. He didn't crouch or kneel the way people do around children. He simply stood before her, speaking with the seriousness one reserves for adults. "You did well the other night. You stayed calm." Maya's fear eased a little. "Thank you, sir." Lucas's expression darkened as he looked at the bullet hole. "This wasn't random, Emily. That man from earlier wasn't some petty mugger. He's a scout for a kidnapping ring operating in this area. Maya was marked at the library. When I intervened and broke his wrist, they took it as a direct challenge to their territory. This shot is their message. They know where you live, and they won't abandon a target easily." Lucas turned back to me, meeting my eyes with unflinching certainty. "This place is no longer safe. We can't wait for the second shot. I've arranged another location, quiet, secured, monitored 24 hours a day. A fully furnished, 2-bedroom apartment in West Village." My throat closed. "Are you saying, move?" I couldn't answer immediately. It was too much, too fast. Lucas seemed to sense this. "I'm not forcing you, but it's the safer option. As for your work, I know you're freelancing. I own an international trading company. We need an Italian translator for contracts and internal documents. Legal work. Transparent. Starting salary $6,000 a month. Work from home." My mouth opened, but no words came out. 6,000? That was 3 times what I earn now, enough to live without fear of every bill. It felt unreal, like a scene from a movie where a mysterious man not only saves your child, but offers to change your entire life in one night. I couldn't help but question him. "Why are you doing this?" He was silent for a moment before answering. "Because I don't like seeing women and children threatened, especially when I have the power to stop it." I said nothing, though I didn't look away from him. I wanted to believe him, but my past was full of broken promises, full of men who vanished the moment I needed them most. Lucas didn't smile or soften. He simply said, "I know you don't fully trust me. You don't have to. Just know that if you refuse, I'll still assign men to watch this building, to make sure no one comes near you. But if you accept, you can start over somewhere your daughter can sleep safely at night." Maya lifted her head, her eyes pleading silently. I had never seen her so afraid, and never seen her trust someone the way she trusted Lucas. I held her hand, then looked at the man standing before me. "We'll go, but I need a few hours to pack and say goodbye to the neighbors." Lucas nodded. "There's no rush. The apartment is ready whenever you are." He took out a small phone and placed it in my hand. "It's already programmed. 3 numbers only. Mine, my security chief, emergency medical. If anything happens, press a button." I held it, hesitation still, lingering, but something inside me had already loosened its grip on fear. I didn't know what kind of life I was stepping into, but I knew this much. I had reached the end of what I could endure. And when a door opens in the dark, even if there's a shadow behind it, sometimes you walk toward it anyway, not because you trust the man holding it open, but because there is no other choice left when you're fighting to protect your child. We left the old apartment on a Monday morning, the sky heavy with clouds and the air cool enough to sting. Maya sat in the back seat, clutching her backpack, her eyes drifting toward the window with a mix of nervous excitement and quiet worry. I sat beside the driver, a man in a black suit, silent and composed, the kind of person whose every movement seemed calculated long before it happened. None of us spoke during the drive. The car glided through familiar Brooklyn streets, then onto broader, cleaner avenues, before stopping in front of a tall glass building in West Village. I had passed this neighborhood a few times back when I worked as a temporary assistant at a nearby law office, but I never imagined myself living here. The glass doors opened automatically. The lobby was bright, spacious, and gleaming, with a marble reception desk and 2 uniformed attendants who greeted us with a polite nod. No one asked my name. They simply said, "Good morning, Miss Davis. Your apartment is ready," and escorted us to a private elevator. The apartment was on the 14th floor. When the door opened, I found myself standing inside a space nearly 3 times the size of our old place. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a park, an open kitchen with brand-new appliances, and 2 bedrooms decorated simply but warmly. Everything was spotless, quiet, and so pristine that it made me feel strangely out of place. Maya ran into her room and squealed in delight at the sight of the large bed, dressed in pale blue sheets and a Parisienne bookshelf filled with brand-new children's books. I walked slowly through the living room, my hand brushing the soft fabric of the couch, my footsteps disappearing into the polished wooden floor. Everything felt too perfect, almost dreamlike. On the kitchen counter sat a white envelope with my name on it. Inside was a 1-year lease, already signed by Romano Holdings. No rent listed. Just a single line. All expenses paid in advance. There was also a bank card with my name embossed on it, along with a handwritten note. First month's salary. I sat down holding the card, a strange swell of emotion rising in my chest. With the amount written in that account, combined with the fact that I no longer had to worry about New York's suffocating rent, it was the first time in my life I felt financially free. I should have been happy, shouldn't I? After years of struggling, I finally had stable work, a safe home, and my daughter could sleep without being woken by shouting or gunfire. But beneath the relief was an undercurrent of unease, as though this was all too generous a gift not to come without a price. Our first night passed peacefully. Maya fell asleep early, while I sat at the new laptop placed neatly on the desk, translating the first set of documents sent from Lucas's company. Contracts, emails, meeting minutes, everything legitimate, professional, ordinary. I checked twice to be sure. It was still the same dry Italian legal language I had wrestled with before, but now I worked in a room with real lighting, without the looming fear of running out of money to pay the electric bill. Each morning I walked Maya to a nearby private school, where Lucas had arranged a full scholarship for her. She made new friends faster than I expected, perhaps because deep down Maya had always been resilient, even when life had forced her to grow up too quickly. It took me longer to adjust to the feeling of living without constant fear. Each time I stepped into the elevator, I glanced around. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart quickened. But as the days passed, sunlight pouring into the kitchen each morning, Maya laughing more freely, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, we had stepped into a new chapter. Not an easy one, but one with clean pages, free of bloodstains, and the smell of gunpowder. And while I didn't dare call it happiness, it was peace, and peace to me was priceless. I started my new job 3 days after we moved in. Everything happened so quickly, I had no time left for doubt. At exactly 8 in the morning, I received a call from a woman with a gentle yet precise voice who introduced herself as Valentina, the coordinating assistant for the legal department at Romano Holdings. She explained that I would work fully remotely, but an internal office was available should I ever need printing, legal references, or assistance with any documents. She emailed me a detailed work package, a list of documents to translate, deadlines, points of contact, and instructions for accessing their security system. Everything was organized, logical, and complete, so much so that I had to admit the company operated far more professionally than I had expected. When I opened the first file, a 20-page contract between Romano Holdings and an Italian wine exporter, my hands trembled slightly. Not because it was hard, but because I hadn't worked in a truly professional environment in years. My recent freelance work had been small: personal letters, brief contracts, odd requests. But this every sentence carried legal weight, and any mistake could lead to consequences far beyond what I had ever dealt with. Instead of fear, though, I felt driven. I brewed coffee, opened the window for sunlight, played soft music, and began translating. The morning passed in peaceful silence, no neighbors yelling, no pounding footsteps, no urgency to rack up extra hours for milk money. Instead, I found myself working at a steady pace, with a newfound feeling I was being trusted. Just before noon, Valentina called. She checked on me with warm professionalism, asking if I needed help navigating the system or had questions about the documents. I told her everything was fine, and she laughed softly, light and familiar, like someone I'd known for years. Through her voice, I sensed kindness, attentiveness, and none of the cold distance I had imagined when I heard her name for the first time. In the days that followed, she became the first person to send each new batch of documents, the one who reminded me of upcoming video meetings when necessary, and the one who patiently clarified any legal term I questioned. We didn't talk much, but every interaction gave me the sense that I was part of something structured, clean, and right. I didn't see Lucas again after that night. He didn't text, didn't call, didn't appear unexpectedly. Yet every salary payment came on time. Every document I submitted was acknowledged promptly. I came to understand that his world was not the same as mine, and perhaps his silence was his way of saying I was safe, that he didn't need to stand in the doorway for me to know it. Still, some evenings, as I brewed tea and stood by the window, looking down at the glittering city lights, I found myself wondering where he was, what he was doing, and why he had chosen to help a woman and her child who had nothing to offer him. Then I would return to my desk and type another paragraph, as if that curiosity were nothing more than a thin thread woven into my new life. It wasn't normal, not yet, but I knew I was walking more steadily now on a path I never expected to take. One Saturday morning, just as I closed my laptop to make another cup of coffee, the doorbell rang. No one had announced a visit. I glanced at the door panel monitor, and my heart tightened when I saw the familiar face on the screen. Lucas. He wore a simple shirt and a dark leather jacket, his hair slightly damp, as though he had walked in light rain. I opened the door, still searching for words, but he spoke first, his voice calm, almost casual, as though this visit were part of some weekly routine. I heard from Valentina that you had a small issue with the lighting control in the kitchen. I was nearby, so I stopped by to check. I hesitated for a moment, glancing toward the kitchen where the lights were shining perfectly, as they always had. I didn't correct him. I stepped aside and nodded for him to come in. Lucas entered with natural ease, his eyes moving over the apartment not out of curiosity, but instinct, as though he was trained to assess every space he walked into. He paused at the kitchen, examined the control panel on the wall, removed it, and inspected it in silence. I stood beside him, unsure of what I could safely say. After several quiet minutes, he placed the device back and murmured, "It's probably a heat sensor issue. I'll have someone replace the entire unit next week, just to be sure." I nodded, almost amused by the clumsiness of the excuse. yet oddly comforted by it. Lucas was not the type of man to show up without reason, and clearly this time, the reason was simply a pretext. He didn't say it, and I didn't ask. Maya emerged from her room then, her hair messy, her eyes still heavy with sleep. She froze when she saw Lucas, then broke into a bright smile, as if greeting a long-missed friend. "Uncle Lucas." He turned, nodding gently to her, his gaze softening noticeably. "Good morning." She hurried closer, asking, "Would you like a waffle? Mom just made some." I blinked. Maya lied effortlessly, and I wasn't sure where she learned it. Lucas looked at me as though waiting for my response. I shrugged slightly. If he's not in a rush, sure. And so we ended up having breakfast together. I reheated the waffles, brewed fresh coffee, and Maya chattered away about school, her friends, her favorite subjects, asking Lucas questions like whether he liked math or what sports he had played as a kid. He answered each one calmly, without avoiding or embellishing, but never with too much openness. I watched him throughout that morning, and for the first time I saw a different part of him. Not the cold, powerful presence from the night in the park, but someone quieter, restrained, and strangely lonely. There were moments when he looked at Maya, and something like sadness flickered through his eyes, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. After breakfast, he stood and excused himself. I walked him to the door, lingering for a moment before it closed. Lucas turned to me, his expression suddenly serious. "If anyone bothers you, anyone at all, you tell me immediately." I nodded. "Yes, I know." He paused, then added, "Not everyone offers help without wanting something in return, but I'm not one of those people." My heart stilled for a moment. His words weren't a threat, but neither were they quite a reassurance. I searched his eyes for an answer to a question I couldn't form, but Lucas only nodded gently and turned away. The door closed behind him, leaving me standing in the quiet apartment with the lingering scent of coffee, warm waffles, and something else, a feeling I couldn't yet name. Something no longer distant, no longer foreign, something becoming familiar. And for me, familiarity had never been both comforting and frightening in equal measure until now. I didn't expect Lucas to return so soon, but a few days after that morning with the waffles, he called me around 6 in the evening and asked, out of nowhere, whether the two of us had eaten dinner yet. I told him I hadn't had time to cook, that Maya was doing her homework, and I was still finishing a translation. He went silent for a moment, then said simply, "I'll bring food over. It won't take long." I didn't know whether I agreed out of politeness, or because I had been waiting for it without admitting it, but when he arrived with 2 paper bags filled with the warm, rich smell of Italian food, I found myself quietly tidying the dining table, as if it were something we had always done. Maya ran out first, excitedly opening the bags and squealing when she saw the creamy pasta and garlic bread, what she always called the rich people's feast, whenever we saved up to make it ourselves on weekends. Lucas took off his jacket, hung it carefully on the rack, and sat with us as though this was something he did every evening. Dinner felt strangely gentle. Maya spoke more than usual, telling stories about school, about her new teacher who sounded like a robot, and the girl in her class who was allergic to dairy but still insisted on drinking cocoa. Lucas listened with full attention, nodding at the right moments, his eyes softening each time she laughed. I almost forgot the distance between us until Maya finished eating and excused herself to work on her drawing assignment. With just the two of us left at the table, the air shifted. I took a sip of the wine he brought, the first glass I had tasted in months, and asked the question that had lived in my chest far too long. "Why are you helping us?" He looked at me, his gaze steady, unblinking, yet he didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, it was slow. "I had a little sister once. She was Maya's age. She died in what they called an unexpected accident. But nothing is unexpected. It was the result of a world where the strong do what they want, and the weak get left behind." I sat silent, unable to form any comfort. Lucas leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. "I grew up in a family where everything had a price. Money, power, loyalty. I learned to negotiate before I understood what the word fully meant. And then one day I realized that if I couldn't change the world, at least I could keep a few people from being devoured by it." I asked quietly, "So you chose to become part of that world just so you could protect others from it?" He smiled, then the first real smile. That night, but it wasn't a light one. I'm no hero, Emily. I do things most people wouldn't dare to do because they're not clean, not pleasant. I have people who answer to me. I also have enemies. I've protected many, but there are plenty who fear my name. I set my glass down, trying to keep my voice steady. And me and Maya, what are we in that world of yours? Lucas looked at me for a long time, as if weighing something fragile and heavy. Then he said, "You two were not part of any plan. But when Maya ran to me that day, when I saw your eyes the night you were shot at, I knew I couldn't turn away. Not because I owe anyone, but because if there is any part of me left worth saving, it's the part that chooses to do the right thing without asking for anything back." My heart pounded not out of fear, but out of something far deeper. In that moment I didn't see the powerful, enigmatic figure people whispered about. I saw a man carrying an old wound, trying to reclaim whatever humanity he had left by protecting things more fragile than he was. I didn't know what would happen after that night, but in that warm kitchen, under the soft golden lights and beside a half-finished glass of wine, something shifted. Not the fear, it was still there, but something else. A small opening in my chest, a quiet readiness to hear a story with no ending, one that began with truth. From that night forward, something between Lucas and me changed, though neither of us said it. He was no longer just the man who came by for work, or under the guise of checking on security. He showed up more often, sometimes simply to drive Maya to school when I was busy, sometimes to drop off pastries or homemade Italian desserts from a chef he trusted. Maya began to treat his presence as something natural, even expected. If Lucas didn't come by for a few days, she'd ask whether he was busy, whether he had gone back to Italy, whether he'd bring chocolates next time. And as for me, even while I kept my instinctive caution close, I couldn't deny the sense of steadiness I felt whenever he was near. On the evenings he stayed for dinner. The small kitchen felt warmer. Maya laughed louder, and I found myself smiling without trying. But I also knew better than anyone that feelings were a luxury I'd taught myself to avoid, partly because of fear, partly because I'd never had the chance to trust someone long enough to let them in. Lucas was the first person who made me feel seen, not as a struggling single mother, not through the lens of my circumstances, but as Emily, the Emily who had once been strong to the point of exhaustion, who had held herself together simply to survive, and who was now slowly learning to feel her own heartbeat again. But precisely because of that, I was careful. I wasn't sure Lucas belonged to a world I could hold on to. He never shared much about his work, about the midnight calls that made him leave without explanation. The men who accompanied him always carried themselves with immaculate formality, speaking more through glances than words, treating him not just as a superior but as someone to be respected and feared. Once, when I casually asked whether he had ever been a lawyer, Lucas held my gaze for a long moment before saying, "I have stood in many courtrooms, but never as a lawyer." I understood he didn't want to elaborate, and I didn't push. I learned to read his silences, to decipher the slight tension in his jaw when someone mentioned the name Romano, or the way he always kept his eye on Maya when we were outside, as if she were something precious he could not allow to slip away. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, Lucas stood by the table holding a glass of water, his expression unusually contemplative. He said softly, "Sometimes I wish I had met you earlier." I turned to him, surprised, then offered a small, tired smile. "I don't know if I would have recognized you back then, in the mess my life was. And I don't know if I would have had the courage to reach for anything." Lucas didn't argue, didn't push. He simply nodded, as if he understood I was speaking not just to him, but to myself. He placed the glass down, said he needed to leave early for a meeting the next morning, and I walked him to the door as I always did. But when his fingers brushed lightly against my wrist, a moment so brief it could have been imagined a warm current shot through my skin. I pulled my hand back quickly, not out of fear, but because if I didn't, I wouldn't trust myself to remain in control. After the door closed, I stood there for a long time, my hand pressed to the spot where he had touched me. I knew the feeling was growing, like a slow burning flame, but I also knew that if I let it ignite, I could lose everything. Not because Lucas was dangerous, but because the world he belonged to had no safe place for someone like me and Maya if things ever went wrong. And I wasn't ready to gamble my daughter's safety on something still so undefined, so I kept my distance. Not because I felt nothing, but because I felt too much. I didn't expect Ryan to come back, and even less did I expect him to appear just when my life felt like it was finally finding its shape again. It was a Thursday afternoon, the sky gray and heavy like a warning. Maya was at her after-school program, and I had just stepped out of the grocery store near the apartment building. When I turned to cross the street, I saw him. Ryan leaned against a lamppost across the road, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes so deep he looked like he had crawled out of a long binge. I froze, gripping the paper bag to my chest as my heartbeat crashed against my ribs. He crossed the street toward me, a crooked smile twisting a face I once thought was warm, a face I once called family. "Long time no see, Emily." I didn't answer. I stepped back instinctively, my mind racing. I didn't know how he found me, but seeing Ryan in this quiet neighborhood felt like watching a crack split open across a safe wall. He looked me over, half mocking, half furious. "Looks like you've upgraded. Fancy coat, nice hair. You think hiding in a rich neighborhood means I can't find you? I've been watching the gates at her new school for 3 days. All I had to do was follow the fancy car that picks her up. Remember who was there for you when you had nothing." I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. "What do you want, Ryan?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping into a darker register. "I came to see my daughter. I have the right to." I shook my head coldly. "You walked out 3 years ago. No calls, no child support, nothing. You lost your rights the day you chose to disappear." He laughed, sharp and ugly, but fear flickered beneath it. "I want 5 minutes with her. She's my kid, Emily, not just yours." I stepped back, ready to go inside the building, when he grabbed my arm, squeezing hard. "Don't think you can hide forever. Who's paying for this new life? Some sugar daddy? Or did you trap some rich idiot?" His grip tightened painfully, but before I could pull away, a voice sliced through the air behind me, low, sharp, like a blade. "Let her go." Ryan and I both turned abruptly. Lucas stood a few steps away, his eyes dark, his jaw clenched. He didn't rush forward, but every step he took made the air around us thicken. Ryan still hadn't released me, but his hand trembled. "Who's this? Your new boyfriend? Didn't know you liked the Mafia type." Lucas didn't answer. He didn't need to. His stare alone was enough to make even a calm man step back. I watched Ryan's bravado crumble as he slowly released my arm. "I just want to see my daughter. I have the right." Lucas moved closer, his voice so low it was nearly a whisper. "Your rights ended the day you walked out and left them alone in those damp apartments surrounded by gunfire. You have no idea what she had to do to keep your daughter alive, so don't stand here talking about rights." Ryan looked from me to Lucas, panic rising behind his eyes. He stumbled back a step, trying to salvage his pride. "I'll go, but I'll be back. She's still my kid." He turned and hurried away, nearly running by the time he reached the corner. Lucas stayed where he was, watching until Ryan's silhouette disappeared completely. I couldn't speak. My hands were still shaking. Lucas walked up to me, gently took the grocery bag from my arms, then looked directly into my eyes. "From now on, if he comes near you again, call me. Even if it's the middle of the night." I nodded, unable to form words. In that moment, I no longer felt like I was fighting alone to protect everything. For the first time in years, someone was standing in front of me, and I knew, without question, that I wasn't alone anymore. 3 days after the encounter with Ryan, Lucas appeared at the apartment just before dusk, carrying a black leather briefcase, and wearing a face colder than usual. I had just finished clearing the dinner dishes, and Maya was in her room doing homework. Lucas didn't say anything when he stepped inside. He simply placed the briefcase on the table and sat across from me. I looked at him, sensing immediately that something serious was unfolding. Lucas opened the briefcase, took out a thin stack of documents, set them neatly on the table, and gently slid them toward me. Inside were the papers for the termination of parental rights, all prepared and only needing Ryan's signature. I froze, staring at the folder as though it were something foreign. I hadn't expected Lucas to go this far. He didn't break eye contact as he spoke in a low, steady voice. "I know this isn't simple." But he came back, approached you, threatened Maya, and that cannot happen again. I want to end every possible way he could use to disrupt the stability you and your daughter finally have. I sat down and flipped through the documents. Everything was meticulously prepared, clear, legal, undeniable. There were statements confirming the years Ryan abandoned his child, offering no support and no contact, testimonies from old neighbors and Maya's former school, even a psychological assessment from a doctor documenting the harmful impact Ryan had left behind. I looked up, hesitation heavy in my eyes. "You're planning to give this to Ryan?" "He won't sign easily." Lucas's lips curved, not in relief but in something closer to ruthless certainty. "I'm not asking him to. I'll give him a choice. Sign and walk away forever, or keep showing up and face consequences he cannot imagine. I know exactly what kind of man he is. Ryan isn't brave. He's the kind who's loud when he feels powerful, and who runs when cornered." I looked at Lucas, feeling a mixture of relief and unease rise inside me. I didn't want Maya growing up under the shadow of a man who could reappear at any moment. But I also feared that intervening so deeply in someone's life might trigger consequences none of us could predict. Lucas seemed to read my thoughts. "I'm not forcing you," he said quietly. "But I believe this is the only way to put an end to the past. Maya deserves to grow up with real safety. And you, Emily, deserve peace after all the years you've carried everything alone." I didn't answer right away. I barely slept that night. I watched Maya sleeping peacefully, studied each small feature on her face, and wondered how she would feel if she knew her biological father was being erased from her life entirely. But then I remembered the terror in her eyes when she saw Ryan, the bruises his hands had once left on my arm, the cold words he spoke before walking away. And I understood that what I was protecting wasn't the idea of fatherhood, it was her right to grow up without harm. The next morning, I called Lucas and said only, "Do it." 3 days later, Lucas met Ryan with the documents. I wasn't there, but Lucas told me the essentials afterward. The meeting took place in a small cafe in Long Island, somewhere no one would recognize them. Ryan arrived exhausted and more hollowed out than the last time. Lucas placed the documents before him and explained the options. No threats, just a simple negotiation. Sign and accept a small sum to disappear, or refuse and face a long legal battle he could not win. Ryan stayed silent for a long time, then picked up the pen and signed. He left the cafe without a word. From that moment, he vanished completely. No anonymous calls, no sightings in the old neighborhood, no further attempts to intrude. Lucas said he'd arranged for Ryan to leave the state, far enough to understand that coming back wasn't necessary. I held the completed papers in my hands, feeling a strange, quiet relief. A chapter had finally closed. No shouting, no arguments, no tears, only paper and a signature severing every tie. And sometimes, that kind of silence is the clearest sign of freedom. I never expected the relief to feel this profound as I held the finalized documents, legally ending Ryan's parental rights. For years, I had prepared myself for the worst, for the day he would show up again and destroy the life Maya and I had tried to rebuild piece by fragile piece. But now it was over. No more dread at footsteps in the hallway. No more sleepless nights holding Maya through nightmares triggered by fractured memories of a father who once screamed and pounded on doors. I sat in the quiet kitchen, afternoon light spilling softly across the table, and for the first time in years, safety felt real, something I could touch, something living in the walls of our home. Lucas didn't say much afterward. He only sent a short message, "It's done. Maya won't be bothered again." I read that line again and again, as though it were a seal of protection my heart had longed for, but never dared to trust. I didn't know exactly what Lucas said to Ryan, or how he convinced him, but the result was undeniable, and that alone stirred something inside me. I had always believed I had to stand on my own, fight on my own, because no one was coming to save us from the storms. But Lucas did something no one else had ever done. He didn't just show up when I needed help. He handled everything quietly, firmly, without causing more harm, yet with enough force to send the message that Maya and I were no longer easy prey. Maya seemed to sense the change too. She laughed more, slept deeper, no longer startled when the doorbell rang or when I stepped outside to run errands. One evening, while I was folding laundry, she walked in hugging her worn teddy bear, her eyes bright with innocence. "Mom, is Uncle Lucas a good person?" The question made me pause. I looked at her, then nodded, my voice soft but certain. "Yes, he is." Maya smiled and pressed her cheek into the bear. "I thought so. He's not like other people. He makes you smile more." My heart stilled for a moment. I didn't know how much Maya understood, but she was more perceptive than I ever gave her credit for. I knelt down and held her close. Yes, he's helped me a lot, and I believe he cares about you too, not just because you're my daughter. She nodded gently. I think so too. That night, after she fell asleep, I stood by the window looking out at the city. The lights flickered the way they always did, but they didn't feel distant or cold anymore. They felt like quiet signals from a world beyond us, reminding me that life kept moving. And somewhere in that vastness, Maya and I were slowly finding our place. I picked up my phone, opened Lucas's last message, thinking of typing something thanks, or even a simple good evening, but I set the phone down. Maybe another time, when the moment felt right, I would say everything that I was grateful, that I was beginning to believe in something I had long stopped believing in, and that because of him, I was learning how to breathe again like someone no longer running. After Ryan disappeared, the air in our home felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. I began noticing the small things I once overlooked, the way Maya laughed out loud at cartoons, or the cheerful way she recounted her school day while I made coffee in the mornings. Life settled into a gentle rhythm, and within that rhythm, Lucas's presence became something familiar. He didn't show up in overwhelming ways. Instead, he entered our lives slowly, naturally, like a soft tide rising. He visited more often, sometimes bringing pastries from a bakery he trusted, sometimes carrying books Maya couldn't find at the library. The first time he came with someone was on a chilly weekend afternoon. Lucas knocked on the door with a boy around 9, standing beside him, dark hair tousled, eyes sharp yet shy. Lucas rested a hand lightly on the boy's shoulder. This is Gabriel, my nephew. He'll be staying with me for a few months. I invited them in, hiding my surprise. Maya burst out of her room, studied Gabriel curiously, and quickly dragged him inside to show him her toys. Their laughter filled the apartment faster than I expected. Gabriel was quiet but polite, always offering to help set the table or clear dishes. He wasn't like most children I'd met. There was a carefulness in him, a depth beyond his age. Lucas told me his parents had recently divorced, and Gabriel was staying with him temporarily to find stability again. I didn't pry, only observed the quiet tenderness Gabriel showed around Maya. Once, I found him sketching by the window while Maya slept against his shoulder. He didn't wake her, he simply remained still, letting her rest. The sight touched something deep inside me, as though this moment had lived in some forgotten corner of my heart, long before it appeared. Lucas gradually became part of our evenings. Sometimes he cooked with me, skillfully chopping vegetables or teasing Maya, until she erupted in giggles. Sometimes we watched old movies together. He sat close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his hand beside mine, though he never crossed a line or touched me. He gave me space, letting me choose the pace, and it was his patience that slowly loosened the armor I had worn for so long. One night, after Maya had fallen asleep and Lucas had taken Gabriel home, I stood on the balcony, the cool wind brushing through my hair, my heart unburdened in a way I hadn't known in years. Lucas stood quietly beside me. After a moment, I turned to him and asked softly, "Have you ever imagined having a family not bound by blood?" Lucas looked at me, his eyes softening. "Yes. But I never thought it would begin with a cry for help on a rainy night." We fell silent. But it wasn't the old silence filled with distance. It was something understood, something shared. A bond was forming, slow, steady, not fiery, but enduring. And I began to think that perhaps life does repay those who have lost too much, not with miracles, but with small, repeated kindnesses, until the heart finally believes it deserves love. I do not remember the exact feeling I had when Valentina walked into my small office with a cup of coffee in her hand and a smile that hinted at something unexpected. That morning was no different from any other. I was reviewing the final translation of a contract between 2 transportation companies before sending it off to the client. Valentina set the coffee on my desk, then perched on the edge of the table across from me, her eyes bright. "Emily, the director wants to see you. Right now." I paused, wondering if I had made a mistake somewhere, but Valentina shook her head and smiled in a way that told me there was more behind this than she was saying. I stood up, feeling a strange flutter of anticipation in my chest. The director's office was on the upper floor, overlooking a park where the last colors of autumn were still clinging to the trees. He was waiting for me, invited me to sit, and got straight to the point. After a few words of congratulations, he announced that I would officially be promoted to North American Translation Team Lead, managing a small group specializing in high-level legal contracts. I could hardly believe my ears. Everything happened so quickly, yet felt like a logical result of months of hard work, of nights spent translating documents until 3 a.m, and mornings spent getting Maya to school before I even had time for coffee. When I walked out of his office that day, holding the new set of documents, there was a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not because of the higher salary or impressive title, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen. Lucas learned the news that same evening. I hadn't planned to tell him. Part of me wanted to hold on to the joy a little longer, but Maya blurted it out the moment he stepped into the kitchen. "Mom got promoted. Now she's the boss." Lucas looked at me with a genuine joy that needed no embellishment. He said one simple sentence that nearly brought me to tears. "I always knew you deserved it." Later that night, after Maya had gone to bed and we were sitting on the sofa watching an old film, Lucas suddenly asked what I used to dream of becoming when I was a child. I laughed, remembering the faint image of a little girl sitting by a window, dreaming of studying at some big university, with bookshelves stretching up to the ceiling and late-night discussions that lasted until dawn. I used to want to go to graduate school, something in languages and communication, but life didn't let me. I didn't finish the sentence, but Lucas looked at me as if he understood every part I didn't say. "Maybe now is the time, Emily," he said quietly. "You're no longer running. Maya is safe. Your job is stable. If there is ever a moment to revisit your dream, it's now." I fell silent. The thought had crossed my mind in passing before, only to be crushed by practicality and the constant worry about survival. But hearing Lucas say it made something shift inside me. A few days later, I spent an evening looking up part-time programs, online degrees, scholarships for working adults and single mothers. The more I searched, the less impossible it felt. When Valentina caught me printing out a few application forms, she wasn't surprised. She even helped me double-check the requirements. "You've always inspired me," she said. "I knew you wouldn't stop here." I smiled, feeling deeply grateful. That night, as I sat on the balcony filling out the first pieces of my application, Lucas called. His voice was low and gentle, just one question. "You're doing something for yourself, aren't you?" I didn't answer right away, but I knew my smile must have said everything. And in that, a moment, I understood that I was no longer just surviving from one day to the next. I was beginning to live with purpose, with dreams, and with the belief that I deserved every bit of it. That quiet Sunday afternoon, sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm golden lines across the floor. Maya was coloring at her little table by the window, glancing occasionally at me as I folded laundry in the living room. She was quieter than usual, her expression thoughtful. When I folded the last of my shirts, she set her crayons down, turned toward me, and whispered, "Mom." I looked at her, noticing how long and seriously those clear eyes were studying me. After a small silence, she asked, "Do you love Uncle Lucas?" The question felt like a small breeze slipping through a wall I had kept tightly sealed. I paused, set the shirt aside, and sat next to her. "I think I have feelings for him. I feel safe around him. But why are you asking?" Maya rested her chin in her hands, her eyes wide. "Because he comes here more, and you smile more when he's around. And Uncle Lucas looks at you like people do in grown-up movies." I laughed at the innocent comparison but couldn't escape the warmth rising in my cheeks. She kept watching me, then suddenly grew serious. "Mom, if you want Uncle Lucas to be your boyfriend, I'm okay with that." My heart skipped. I gently placed my hand over hers. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel sad or feel like someone is getting between us." Maya shook her head, her lips curving into a small pout. At first it was weird, because it was just you and me. But then I saw, he doesn't make you sad, and he doesn't pretend with me. He just is. Like when I broke the vase, he didn't yell. He just asked if I hurt my hand. Or when I fell asleep doing homework, he put a blanket on me. I think he's good, not like Dad. I squeezed her hand, overwhelmed by the maturity of a child only 10 years old. I've always been afraid you wouldn't accept it, that you'd feel like I was replacing your father." Maya grew quiet, then whispered, "Dad left a long time ago. When Uncle Lucas came, I was scared he would leave too, but he didn't. He stayed. After every time we needed help. I don't want him to go anymore." I pulled her into my arms, overcome by a sense of release, like a weight I had carried for years was finally easing. She leaned into my shoulder, her voice soft. "Mom, if Uncle Lucas lives with us one day, I can call him whatever I want, right?" I laughed through my tears. "Whatever you feel comfortable with. No one will force you." She thought for a moment, then whispered, "Maybe, Uncle Lou? It's easy to remember. And it sounds friendly." I laughed and nodded. "Uncle Lou is adorable." Maya narrowed her eyes at me. "But Mom, you have to promise if you love him, you have to be happy. Don't try so hard anymore. Just be you, happy and light. You know you always frown when you cook, right?" I nodded, hugging her closer. "Thank you, Maya. I think it's time I let myself be happy." That evening, when Lucas arrived for dinner as usual, Maya rushed to the door, hugged him quickly, and pulled him into the living room. I stood in the kitchen, my heart quietly thudding. When I returned with 3 plates in my hands, Maya was telling Lucas a story from school, clutching her worn-out teddy bear. I set the plates down, and our eyes met. In that instant, I knew every wall inside me was beginning to dissolve, not because of a confession or a grand gesture, but because of a quiet permission offered by a small heart that had once been hurt but had learned to trust again. And I knew this journey was no longer mine alone. It belonged to the 3 of us. A family forming slowly, through healing, in silence, but with certainty. That night, after Maya was asleep, and the apartment was wrapped in the soft glow of warm yellow light, I sat with Lucas on the balcony, my hands wrapped around the warm cup of tea he had just made. The quiet was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat, a sound I had ignored for years while rushing through life, burdened by fear and responsibilities and forgotten dreams. Lucas remained silent, his gaze fixed on the distant city lights, but I knew he was waiting for me to say the words I had been holding back for months. I turned slightly, facing him fully, my fingers tightening around the cooling cup. "Lucas." He looked at me, his eyes steady and warm. I knew he understood what was coming. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "I don't know how to begin, but I think I shouldn't hide this anymore. I used to be afraid of loving someone, because love meant losing control. I loved the wrong person once, trusted the wrong way, lost pieces of myself when I gave too much. After everything, I promised myself I would never let anyone into my heart again. But then you came, quietly, gently, and I realized I wasn't afraid anymore, because with you, I don't have to pretend to be strong. I can be tired, silent, unsure, and you still look at me the same way. I don't know when these feelings began, but they've grown too real to ignore. I love you, Lucas. I truly love you. I don't need you to promise anything or change my life. I just need you to know. And if you don't feel the same, that's okay. I just can't keep it inside anymore." When the words left me, my chest felt light, as if a weight I had carried for months had finally slipped off. Lucas didn't respond immediately. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes soft like a hand brushing over the rough edges of my soul. Then he set his cup down, turned toward me, and reached for my hand. "Emily, I never thought I could love again. My world used to be darkness, silent deals, shadows, places no one dared to touch. I believed my heart had died a long time ago. But then, on a night, a woman with terrified eyes asked me for help. I didn't know why I stopped for her. Maybe it was her eyes, maybe the honesty in her trembling voice. But from that moment, I couldn't turn away. I tried to keep my distance. I tried not to go too far. But the more I stayed near you, the more I heard Maya laugh, the more I listened to you sigh after long days, the more I knew I had already lost. I love you, Emily. I love you in a way that needs no reason, no title. I love you because you are you, not perfect, but brave, not always strong, but never defeated. And I love Maya too, not because she is your daughter, but because she is part of you, the purest and most beautiful part. My heart felt like it was breaking open in the most tender way. Lucas squeezed my hand, then lifted it gently to his lips, pressing a soft kiss against the places where life had cracked me. We didn't say anything more after that. We simply sat there, side by side, full of emotion. The sky above glittered with stars, and inside my chest, a space that had once been cold was slowly being filled with something warm and steady. A turning point had come not through a promise of forever, but through the simple choice to stay, day after day, for each other. And I knew, from that moment on, I was no longer living just for myself. I had allowed my heart to love again fully, honestly, after years of believing I no longer had the right. From the night that changed everything, the relationship between Lucas and me settled into a new rhythm, unhurried, unshowy, yet filled with trust and quiet peace. We no longer needed many words to understand each other. A single glance or the lightest brush of fingers was enough to know what the other was thinking. Lucas didn't move in entirely, but he was there almost every evening at the dinner table, sharing the small stories of our day, joining in the bright laughter, and sometimes sitting with us in those meaningful silences that say more than conversations ever could. Maya grew increasingly attached to him, calling him Uncle Lou with a natural ease, as if that name had belonged in our family for a long, long time. Gabriel often stopped by on weekends, bringing with him a lively energy and a surprising sensitivity for a boy his age. Within that small but warm circle, I began to see myself as more than a single mother who had once fought to survive every bill, every fear, every lonely night. I was a woman living again, being loved, and finally able to think about who I wanted to become. In the late autumn days, when my new position had finally stabilized, I returned to the graduate school applications I had once abandoned. Sheets of printed program descriptions in international language and communication studies were spread across my desk again, this time not in vague hope, but with clear determination. I knew I had hesitated for too long out of fear of not being worthy, fear of not having enough time, fear of losing the fragile balance I had built. But now, with a man beside me who encouraged me endlessly, and a daughter who believed her mother could do anything, I no longer had a reason to hold back. One evening, as I sat in front of my computer revising my personal statement, Lucas brought over a cup of hot chocolate and placed it beside me, then sat down. "You're planning to apply for the spring semester?" I nodded, smiling slightly. "I've delayed it for many years, but this time I'll try. I don't want to look back 10 years from now and wonder how different things might have been if I'd been brave." Lucas looked at me with the kind of pride that made me feel like I was standing exactly where I was meant to stand. "You've always been strong, Emily," he said gently. "But the courage to dream for yourself again, that's the most beautiful thing. You deserve every opportunity. You don't have to keep sacrificing." I smiled, tightening my fingers around the warm cup. Maybe, once, I believed I had to set aside my dreams to be a good mother. But now I saw that by living honestly, by choosing growth instead of fear, my daughter would learn that happiness isn't about giving up, but about choosing again with courage. Every day, I felt myself becoming a better version of who I had been. Not perfect, not always strong, but brave enough to face things without running. And the miracle was that I wasn't walking that journey alone. Lucas wasn't just the man I loved. He was my ally, my friend, a quiet and steady support beside me. His love never demanded I change. It simply helped me believe I was enough, just as I was. One late afternoon, while Maya and I read together in the living room and Lucas busied himself preparing dinner in the kitchen, I realized my heart no longer carried the heavy imprints of the past. It had learned to love again, to trust again, and to dream again. And perhaps that was the clearest sign that I was finally living a life I had chosen, for myself. On an early spring morning, sunlight filtered through the thin curtains and fell across Maya's sleeping face as she curled beneath her blanket, still clutching the same old teddy bear she had held for years. In the kitchen, Lucas was making coffee, his hair still tousled with the warmth of sleep. I stood leaning against the doorway watching him, a scene so ordinary, yet one that stirred a strange and overwhelming sense of peace in me. No anxious footsteps echoing behind me, no long cold nights at the table hunched over unpaid bills. Now, in this small kitchen, there was the smell of toasted bread, the whistle of the kettle, the sound of a child's laughter, and the warm gaze of a man who chose to stay not out of obligation, but from genuine love. Life doesn't change in a single night. It evolves through small steps, quiet choices, and moments when we allow ourselves to believe that happiness is something we deserve. I once thought I would forever be a single mother, struggling in a harsh city, that love was a luxury meant for others. But then, on a rainy night, when I cried out for help in desperation, a door opened. Not a miracle, just the presence of someone patient enough, compassionate enough, strong enough to stay when I was at my weakest. Lucas didn't change my life for me. He helped me see that I could rewrite it myself. Maya grew more confident, her eyes unclouded by fear when she spoke about the future. She once told me, "Mom, Uncle Lou isn't replacing anyone. He's just someone who deserves to be with you." I held her close and realized that sometimes the acceptance of a child is the strongest affirmation of an adult's choice. I submitted my graduate school application and received an acceptance letter for the upcoming fall semester. A new chapter was waiting, not one built on survival or escape, but on growth, purpose, and the woman I had always hoped to become. We didn't have a picture-perfect family like in the movies. No candlelit dinners, no vows whispered under moonlight. But we had each other honesty, listening, laughter, the occasional disagreements, and the willingness to understand one another again and again. And that was enough to be a family. Emily, Lucas, and Maya's story may be fictional, but the emotions, the pain, the courage, and the healing within it are deeply real things many of us quietly endure in our own lives. If you're watching this video and see a part of yourself in this story, remember that you are not alone. Wounds are not the end, they are the beginning of a new journey, one where you have the right to be loved, to dream again, and to live a life shaped by your own choices. What about you? How did this story make you feel? Was there a moment that touched your heart? Have you ever felt like Emily at some point in your life? We would truly love to read your honest thoughts in the comments below. Please share them so we know you are listening, connecting, and feeling these small but deeply emotional pieces with us. If this story brought you something meaningful, please hit the like button to support us, share it to spread the message, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the heartfelt stories ahead. Each subscription from you is a powerful motivation for us to continue bringing human, intimate, and inspiring content every day. Thank you for staying with us until the end of the video. Wishing you good health, happiness, and gentle peace in the smallest moments of your life. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.